Hi everyone, my name is Samuel Chang and together with Alex Zakaria, Andrelo and Chiu Chong Seng, we are presenting our design project on predicting Malaysian school completion rates. Our group name is BallsDestroyerXHelloWorld and our work falls under Team 3, Smart Government. The question driving our project is whether economic pressure drives schools drop out across Malaysian states. There are three core problems we identified. First, school completion rates are not uniform across the country. Certain states, particularly in East Malaysia and the East Coast, have consistently underperformed relative to the national benchmark across all three school stages. Second, broad national level intervention may miss localized drivers of dropouts. And as our unsupervised analysis will show later, the drivers are not quite what you might expect. Third, there is currently no data-driven tool that can forecast which states are at risk of declining completion rates before the decline actually happens. Our project addresses all these three gaps. We split the project into two parallel work streams. Alex and I handled the supervised learning side, where we built two regression models to predict next year school completion rates at the state, stage, and sex level using data from OpenDOSM. Andre and Chong Sang, on the other hand, handled the unsupervised side, where they applied clustering methods to group Malaysian states by their socio-economic profiles, analyzed completion rate trends over time, and compared ML models against Holt-Winter's exponential smoothing for forecasting. They also ran a separate analysis on Brazilian national education data for comparison. Both work streams draws from the same OpenDOSM source data. All our data come from OpenDOSM. We use 9 datasets covering school completion rates, poverty, household incomes, household size, population, fertility rates, and district-level data for teachers, schools, and students enrollment. After cleaning, the master panel covers all 16 states from 2017 to 2022, 96 rows in total. 2016 was dropped because district education data was missing that year. Andre and Chong Sang also used the Brazilian national data from the World Bank and UNESCO, covering from 2000 to 2025. For the supervised side, we kept male and female rows separate to maximize training data. The prediction target is next year completion rate, constructed by shifting the completion rate forward 1 year per group, so the model always predicts a value it has never seen. For features, the most important ones are autoregressive signals from the completion rate itself, the leg 1 red, a 2-year rolling mean, year-on-year change, and the gap from national benchmark. We also included school capacity features like total schools, students, and teachers. Economic features like income and poverty were explicitly excluded because cross-validation showed they actually hurt performance, and as Andre will show later, that makes a lot of sense given what the data actually tell us about economic pressure. For splitting the data, we use a strict chronological design. We trained on 2017 to 2020, giving us 384 rows, and held out 2021 as input to predict 2022 completion rates, giving us 96 test rows. We never used random splitting because random splitting would allow future years to appear in training. For example, a 2021 row could end up in the training set and leak future information into the model. That is called temporal leakage, and it would mean the results look artificially better than they actually are. For hyperparameter tuning, we use 3 expanding chronological validation folds with boundaries at 2018, 2019, and 2020. This means that the first fold trains on 2017 and validates on 2018. The second trains on 2017 to 2018 and validates on 2019, and so on. The test set will touch exactly once at the very end after all hyperparameters decisions were finalized. Now let's move on to my model. My model is a random forest regressor implemented using scikit-learn. Random forest builds an ensemble of decision trees on bootstrap samples and averages their prediction, which reduces overfitting and handles the mix of continuous and categorical features in our panel well. Through grid search over the chronological validation folds, I settled 100 trees, fully grown trees with no depth limit, and a maximum of 5 samples required at each leaf to prevent the trees from memorizing individual training rows. The features set I use is autoregressive categorical education, which has 20 features, 70 numeric features from the completion history and education capacity groups, and 1 hot encoded categorical identifiers for state, stage, and sex. I benchmark against 7 baseline including training means, persistence, historical group mean, and ridge regression. The chronological validation MAE was 2.68% points across the 3 folds. Looking at the features importance chart on the right, all 6 top features are completion history signals. The number 1 is the gap between the state and the national benchmark, followed by a 2-year rolling mean and the current completion rate. The leg 1 rate is 4th. This tells us that the most powerful predictor of next year completion rate is simply how the state has been performing recently, not any economic indicator. On the held-out test set, the random forest achieved a test MAE of 3.18% points within a 2 pp rate of 34.4%. To be transparent about the results, the random forest actually performed worse than the best rule-based baseline on every metric. The best baseline was the historical state, stage, and sex group mean, which achieved an MAE of 2.6. The random forest also returned a negative R squared of negative 1.581, which means it performed worse than simply predicting the training mean for every test row. The reason for this is because 2022 test set was unusual. Actual completion rate in 2022 were uniformly very high, and close to 100% actually, across nearly all states, while the training data covered a wider range of values from earlier years. The model trained on that wider range and then faced a test set with much less variance to explain. Both models show these issues. Alex SVR addresses this better than my random forest, which is why his model wins a comparison. Now I will hand over to Alex to talk about his SVR.
Hi, I am Alex Zakaria, and I'll present the support vector regression. I built the support vector regression model for the supervised regression workstream. SVR uses an RBF kernel, which allows the model to capture non-linear relationships between the engineered features and the next year completion rates. My final SVR configuration used C equal 1.0, epsilon equals 0.1, and gamma equals 0.01. Because SVR is sensitive to feature scale, the numeric features were standardized using standard scalar inside the modeling pipeline, while the categorical identifiers were handled through encoding. The selected feature set was full_without_economic with 33 features in total, 30 numerical features, and 3 categorical identifiers. One important addition was the calibration step. During the chronological validation, the SVR consistently underpredicted completion rates. To correct this, I calculated the mean residual from the training period validation predictions only, not from the held out test set, and added a constant intercept of plus 0.6659 percentage points to all predictions. The final chronological validation MAE was 2.43 percentage points across the 3 validation faults. The reason this feature set excludes direct income and poverty variables is that they were tested, but they did not improve chronological validation MAE. Instead, the final SVR relied more on completion history, Malaysia benchmark gap signals, demographic, population, fertility, and household-related features. Next is the supervised results, SVR versus random forest. On the 96-row held-out test set, where 2021 inputs predict 2022 completion rates, SVR outperformed the random forest on every listed metric. SVR achieved a test MAE of 2.02 percentage points, compared with 3.18 for random forest. SVR also had a lower RMSE, 2.73 versus 3.85, and a lower median AE, 1.58 versus 2.73. At the row level, SVR produced a lower absolute error on 74 out of the 96 test rows, which is 77.1% of the held-out test set. It also achieved 63.5% of predictions within 2 percentage points and 91.7% within 5 percentage points. Both models returned negative R-squared value, negative 0.301 for SVR and negative 1.581 for random forest. This remains a limitation because it means the model did not explain variance better than a constant mean baseline. However, SVR still performed better than random forest on MAE, RMSE, median AE, tolerance coverage, and row-level absolute error. SVR also beat the best available baseline for the key error metrics: historical, state, stage, sex, mean for MAE, and the persistence for median AE. So although R-square is negative, SVR is still stronger supervised regression model for practical error-based prediction. Next is the supervised regression AI demonstrator. The supervised regression demonstrator is a Streamlit app hosted at the link so it can be accessed without installation. The app is organized into 4 main sections. The shared context section explains the data pipeline, target construction, and chronological split. The SVR section shows the hyperparameter search, final test predictions, error diagnostics, and permutation importance. The comparison section places both models side by side using the metric leaderboard, row-level winner summary, prediction scatter plots, and error breakdown by state, stage, and sex. The app also includes a non-evaluable 2023 forecast preview for 96 state, stage, sex rows because actual 2023 targets are not available. I will now hand over to Andre, who will present the unsupervised workstream. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Andre. Moving on to our unsupervised learning model, we have compiled historical data spanning from socio-economic domains like completion, poverty, and enrollment. Our processing workflow involves standardizing these metrics, filtering for 16 states, and merging them into a unified master dataset. From here, we have engineered four core metrics, including student-teacher ratio, education pressure, and urban pressure. Finally, we use coloration heat maps to select stage-specific features, while absolute poverty, median income are universally retained across all primary and secondary stages. Metrics such as primary student-teacher ratio and fertility rate were tailored to their specific education models. Correlation between socioeconomic and school-related variables and completion rate at 3 levels. Theoretically, higher income should increase completion, while higher poverty, larger household size, and higher fertility should reduce it. In practice, income and poverty show mixed and opposite patterns. Especially for primary completion, household size and fertility also shows weaker than expected effect. So education system variables give clear signals. Higher student per teacher ratio reduces primary completion, while schools per 1,000 students increase it. Educational pressure combines these factors into meaningful, especially at the primary level. Overall, primary completion shows the strongest and the most interpretable correlation, whereas lower and upper secondary completion are less predictable, suggesting that primary education outcomes are more directly affected by both socio-economical and infrastructure factors. Here are K-means clustering results across the 3 stages. For primary, we have identified two clusters, revealing a counterintuitive trend where poorer states actually achieve higher completion rates. For lower secondary, we have a more stable structure with 3 clusters showing perfect agreement with hierarchical clustering later on. Finally, for upper secondary is broken down into a highly complex 6-cluster structure. However, due to its low silhouette score, we evaluate these results as strictly exploratory results only. Moving on to our cluster validation, using hierarchical clustering and dynamic time morphing series clustering. Hierarchical clustering confirms that our lower secondary model with a perfect agreement score of 1, while upper secondary remains weaker and fragmented. Crucially, our dynamic time morphing series analysis shows that there is almost zero alignment with k-means, or ARI values falling below 0.2. This proves a key insight: economical profiles and temporal completion trends are entirely independent. States sharing the same economical baseline does not follow the same trajectory over time.
Hello, my name is Shuchang Sheng, and I'll be covering forecasting comparison, Brazil analysis, unsupervised demonstrator, and finishing off the presentation. For forecasting comparison, we use an expanding window one step ahead method. We use 4 different models: random forest, gradient boosting, ridge regression, and Holt-Winters. Random forest was found to be the best among all 4 models. Unfortunately, all R-squared values were found negative across all 4 modules and all 3 stages. This was likely due to Malaysia's state-level completion rates being too small and too irregular to forecast from. To understand why the forecasting methods failed, we decided to run it on Brazilian national education data. The correlation were completely different, as poverty, Gini index, GDP per capita, and fertility rate were completely different from Malaysia. It was found that K-means error clustering on Brazil had the optimal K of 2 and a silhouette score of 0.598. For forecasting, Holt-Winters was found to be the best model. The unsupervised demonstrator is a online and local Streamlit application. It is used for both Brazil and Malaysia. There is 8 models in the app, and those 8 models cover data loading, cleaning and master, EDA, k-means, hierarchical, DTW clustering, forecasting, and summary. Once we bring both workstreams together, we had multiple comparisons. For SVR versus random forest, SVR had random forest beat, winning all 4 primary metrics and winning 74 out of 96 individual tests. For k-means and hierarchical, it was surprising as they both had perfect agreement for lower secondary with an ARI of 1 and a strong agreement of primary for ARI of 0.75. On Malaysia versus Brazil, all Malaysia forecasts were shown to be negative R-squared, while all Brazil forecasts were shown to be positive R-squared. Holt-Winters works best for Brazil, while random forest worked well for Malaysia. We found 4 conclusions from this project. SVR beats random forest on all matrices, as completion history signals are the strongest predictors of future completion rates and not economic indicators. Secondly, economic pressure hypothesis was not supported in Malaysia at state level. Higher income states showed lower completion, and both supervised and unsupervised workstreams independently arrived at this conclusion. Third, k-means lower secondary clustering is the most stable and policy relevant structures, with silhouette at 0.476 and ARI of 1. Economically similar states did not follow the same temporal trajectories. Lastly, Holt-Winters was the best model used in Brazil but loses in Malaysia. When data has a clear long-term trend, the time series model wins, as Malaysia state data lacks this property. Thank you.